Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as I show you what I'm going to do with my Ranunculus Corms now that the flowers are no longer blooming. So let's go. I showed you in a previous video the process of what I went through to plant up 2 of these raised beds. I planted the Ranunculus, I also planted a bunch of alyssum, and finally I planted a ton of stock in here. My plan for today is to dig up the ranunculus, divide some of the ranunculus, and then explain to you my process for storing the ranunculus through the winter. The process for digging up ranunculus is actually pretty easy. The corms are not planted very deep, so I'm just using a shovel, a small hand shovel, and I'm digging up one of the plants. And notice that the plant is no longer blooming, it's actually starting to go to seed, and also the leaves have started to turn yellow. So this plant is done photosynthesizing and feeding the corms. So what I'm doing right now is just removing some of the dirt from the base. And what's nice is I had planted one corm, and I can tell you that the corm has divided over time. What I'll end up doing is giving you a close-up shot of how I go about dividing some of these corms. But I'm just going to take this and I'm going to put it in a basket like this so there's some airflow. And I'm going to keep on digging. And what's very important is to make sure that you properly dry your ranunculus corms. You don't want to store them wet, otherwise they're apt to rot. And also, I need to lift my ranunculus corms here in Zone 5B in New Hampshire. And the reason for that is because the corms do not overwinter in my zone. They won't survive. So I do need to store them for the season. There are certain zones where you can leave your ranunculus corms in the ground and they'll be fine and they'll come back year after year. Definitely not the case where I live. And what's nice is this gives me opportunity to plant some other plants in these raised beds. I have plenty of annuals that I still need to get in the ground, so I definitely will be planting them in these open spaces that I'm making here. Just looking around. I pretty much, when I planted the ranunculus, I only planted them on the outside of this raised bed. So it looks like I've dug up all the ones in this area right here. I'm going to work my way down and I'll show you as I go. In terms of where am I going to put these corms so that they can properly dry out, I most likely will leave them in my garage. The garage is a nice dry place. It stays relatively cool. And I'll leave them there for a week. I want to make sure that the corms are properly dried out. It is so worth growing ranunculus. If you've never tried it, I highly recommend it. I have a video out there from the winter that shows the process for how to pre-sprout your ranunculus corms. So definitely be sure to check that out this winter. What I will do is I'll go ahead, dig out the rest of all these ranunculus corms. I'll show you what I ended up with, and I'll also show you the process for dividing them. I dug up all the ranunculus with the exception of this one beautiful red one. It's still blooming. I didn't have the heart to pull it. It has maybe another week and then I'm pulling it out. Okay, let's start dividing some ranunculus. Well, I definitely ended up with more ranunculus than I started with this year. I'm just using a type of hand rake to take off some of the dirt because I just want to show you what we're working with here. This is optional though. When you're drying your ranunculus corms, you don't need to take off the dirt like I'm taking it off. When I planted these, I know that I only had one corm here. You can see these are the roots, and right here are what we call they're the corms, but they look like octopus tentacles. A lot of people refer to them as that. And what I'm going to do is carefully tease it apart, and that's how you divide it. This is optional. You don't have to do this. So there's one right there. And I'm trying not to be too rough. I'm trying to be gentle. This is a smaller one. And that's probably the main one that we started with. So these may bloom next year. They may not bloom. But I now have 3 corms when I really just started with 1. I'm going to go ahead and divide the rest of them. I'm going to show you how many we end up with in the end. So if you can believe it, there are 100 corms in here of the ranunculus. I think I probably started with 15 a few years ago, and now I have 100. If you've never grown ranunculus, I highly recommend you try it. I tried it 2 years ago, and I will tell you I was not successful. It is not the easiest thing to grow, but I did not give up, and that's what I want to tell you to try. If you did try it and you were not successful, or if you've never tried it but you've heard it's really hard to grow, I challenge you to try growing ranunculus. I think it will be rewarding and you'll be glad you did. So what I'm planning to do with these now is I'm going to put these ranunculus corms in my garage. I'm going to let them sit in this box for about 1 week as they dry out. After 1 week, I'm going to remove all the top growth from them. And then I'm going to take the corms, I'm going to put them in a paper bag, I'm going to put some peat moss in there, and I'm going to store the paper bag in my garage. I've done that before, and that's worked for me. During the summer, the garage stays relatively cool, and during the winter, the garage does not fall below 30 degrees. It generally stays between 30 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. I did that last year, and that method worked well for me. My ranunculus corm survived the winter. If you have any questions about growing ranunculus, please leave a comment below. Or if you've ever grown it and you want to share any other additional tips, I'd love for you to share them in the comments. I hope you're having a great day in your garden. I will see you in the next video. Until then, make it a great day with gardening.